My name is Joseph Clifford. I'm a Cutman of 15 years. I have a degree in Applied Health Science, diploma in physical therapy, and higher certificates in strength and conditioning. Now, the reason we're doing this today, very important, are for people who may rather listen to something than to read it, or for people who may have learning difficulties, or may have literacy issues, or those who may have visual impairments. So that's the reason we're doing this. So I want to reach as many people as possible. So, Indigenous Medicines. The content we're going to cover today is basically, well, we've done the intro box stuff done, the healing power of plants, and basically that's just specific to wound care or to bleeding. What I'm going to do is cover 3 continents, Africa, the Americas, and Australia, and then we'll have a little summarize at the end of it. Now, word of warning as I do this, I murder the English language every day. Can't help it, it's my Dublin accent. I just murder the English language every day. So if we come to Latin pronunciation of plants, etc., etc., guaranteed I will make an absolute nuts of it. So just give me the space, right? So I'm not perfect. I'm not a geologist or biologist or whatever with analogy in it. And so I'm just not. I'm a disaster with anything over 4 syllables. So 3. I got 3 out there, so I'm doing good. So okay, without further ado, let's continue. So this is what sparked my interest in natural medicines and indigenous medicines. Okay, from the egg. Okay, from the egg. So in order for you to get a better grasp of this, I'm going to go backwards a little piece, okay, into human migration theory. So basically, human migration theory, basically from Africa, the first Homo sapiens would have made their way from Africa in through Europe, okay, so, and then down, that was around about 75,000 to 100,000 years ago. And then they would have made their way down into Australia by canoes, and that would have been around about 35 to 65,000 years ago, and then headed north up and crossed over from Russia by land bridge into Alaska, North America, or Canada, North America, then into Central America and South America. So fascinating. And on their route they would have used whatever means possible in terms of food, but also in terms of medicines that they would have come across. You've probably seen Joe Rogan there most recently as well, and he had a guest on the show, and he basically said the plant sources or the ground itself, they would have consumed mushrooms or fungi which would basically have had psychedelic properties, and basically that would have promoted human development in terms of brain function. So really fascinating stuff. So anyway, let's go on. So the plant on the left, Aspilia africana, that's my best wing at it anyway. The leaves and the flower of this are bristly, okay. So the herb itself is known as the hemorrhage plant and is used to staunch bleeding and remove foreign bodies from wounds or injuries. So what they do is they make it into a paste. It's been used for other things like scorpion wounds, etc., etc., and several other purposes it has. Now, in terms of me validating that, I couldn't really find anything that actually validated it. But what I could find was that the actual plant itself is very high in antioxidant values. It has high antioxidant properties, and it also has high anti-biotic properties as well. So fascinating stuff. The one on the right, Centilla asiatica. I told you I was going to murder the English language. Anyway, yeah, the one on the right. It's been used in salads, so it's used in salads, so non-heme iron, again a good antioxidant. The deeper the green, the better, etc. But in terms of bleeds and stuff like that, it's been used for various things, but wound healing is one of them. So it would have been placed over or to clean or to put inside of open wounds. Now it's been used for other things like leprosy, tuberculosis, asthma, hypertension, rheumatism, syphilis, and epilepsy, diarrhea, mental illness, and blah blah blah, goes on and on and on. And like I said to you, it is used as a spice, and it is used as a food substance as well. So very, very interesting. And again, in terms of me being able to validate that, I really couldn't. I couldn't find anything to substantiate the claims. However, that doesn't mean it's not true. That doesn't mean it's not true. Equally, when I witnessed the egg membrane being used in an open wound, the inner skin off the egg, I'd asked the doctors that I was working with in the African Box Nation, and they said they'd never experienced anything like that before. So, and they say it may have a function. They didn't say it was wrong. They didn't say it was right. So all I'm saying, it's a question mark. So the second leg of the journey took me to the Americas, or America specifically. So I traveled to Las Vegas, Nevada. So I was working on a Cutman course there. And so we had some downtime, and I decided to actually take a trip into Arizona because I was fascinated by the Navajo Indian. And what's really fascinating about the Navajo Indian is the second largest Indian tribe in the USA, and that's recognized federally. And they use over 450 different types of plant species, which is supposed to be far greater than most other native Indian tribes. So really, really fascinating stuff. So while in Arizona, what we basically did, we went to Antelope Canyon. That's the picture on the far right. Now, fascinating thing, just a little side story about this. The Navajo themselves would have hidden those canyons from custard. So that's in the 19th century. They would have hidden those the canyons from custard. Now, if you're on top of those canyons looking down, because there's so much rock protruding, you don't actually have a clear vision of the actual bottom of the canyon itself. So very, very hard to get a clear shot at anybody that was down at the base of those canyons. And the thing was, the Navajo themselves would have hid there from Custer. So when they knew Custer was coming to town, so basically they would have hid. And now while I was walking, the reason I found out that, I found footholds all the way up the rock in some places. And I'd asked our guide, who was Navajo Indian, and she basically told me that basically they would have carved out footholds in the rock itself so they could get up and down, climb up and down really fast for a quick escape or whatever. So really fascinating. So, well, let's go on to the plant sources. So I was asking them also about plant sources that we used for healing properties, etc. So, the plant on the left, Yarrow, this is the one that came up the most, the plant on the left. So this is the one with the white flower. Now the plant itself is regarded in herbalism as one of the laws of signature. It looks like what it treats, and so basically what it did treat was nosebleeds. I don't get the connection, but anyway, that's me. What would I know? So basically the plant looks like what it treats, but it was used for nosebleeds. Now basically the actual leaf on it itself was furry. It was actually kind of really furry to the touch. But believe it or not, in terms of its credibility, in terms of its use and credibility for wounds and stuff, what I actually did find through papers on WebNet is basically it is used for women who have incisions after in the vagina after they've had childbirth. So basically, if they are sutured, what they do is they actually use yarrow in obviously a cream form to actually place over the sutures themselves, and it has been proven to improve healing. So again, that's fascinating. The one on the right, tannic acid, has been used for centuries. Tannic acid. So basically, what that is, those balls you see on the plant on the right hand side are basically on. They only develop on certain oak tree twigs, and so basically insects basically make these things. these are basically removed and fashioned into medicines. Now I've seen some YouTube clips on this where they've actually boiled them down, and so then they extracted the fluids from the actual nut galls. They're called nut galls themselves, so tannic acid. So to extract the tannic acid, and that would have been used in anything from urinary, painful joints, burns, skin rashes, and bleeding. Now again, when you dip into science and you're looking for whether it can be substantiated or not, I couldn't really find anything to substantiate it. Again, it doesn't mean it's not actually true. So it just means that they need to do more tests on the actual plant itself to actually say yes or no in terms of its use. But it has been around for centuries. Now, traveling further south down into South America, I couldn't have done this without including the Incas, and the reason I couldn't leave this out is I just think it's so fascinating. Trepanation, the Inca Indian and trepanation. Now when you think trepanation, see this small skull, two small skulls just hovering over the photograph. You have a picture on the left hand side of the Incas, and over that two skulls. So basically you'll see small holes that are drilled into those skulls. Some of them are bigger than others. Now basically the reason they did that was during battle. Now this is going back at 400 BC. During battle, the Inca Indians were primarily injured to the center of the head or to the actual left side of the head. And the reason for that, well, work it out, same as Orthodox versus Orthodox, is because that would have been the predominant right side that was used. So in other words, the vast majority of injuries they found in skulls that they've uncovered were basically to the center and to the left. So that would have been from a right-handed enemy or opponent or whatever. No, not an opponent, enemy. Yeah, would have hit them who would have been right-hand dominant. So really fascinating stuff. Now initially they would have drilled bigger holes, and they found that recovery or mortality rates were far fewer. So around about 4,000, when you think about 400 BC, the mortality rate was somewhere between 50 and 70%. So the mortality rate was somewhere between 50 and 70%. But the bigger the hole, they found that the harder it was for the individual to recover. So historically what they found over a period of time through carbon dating, looking at these skulls, was they found that the holes in the skulls got smaller and smaller. And the reason they would have drilled those holes, and again, was probably to release pressure from the brain. It was basically used for treating head injuries, like I said, from battle. But they made those holes smaller, and the reason they did was for recovery. They found better recovery, and mortality rates rose if the holes were smaller. So really fascinating stuff. When you think that the tools that they had would have been quite primitive, when you look at the actual holes in the left skull, the one on the top left hand side, they're very, very small, but look how neat they are. Even the bigger holes on the right hand side in the skull, look how neat those holes are in the skull. So again, fascinating stuff. So what they would have used on patients, so in other words on their patients, the Inca surgeons, they would have used combination of now wait for this, this is best, yes, drinks, well, which would have had some kind of alcohol in them, or fermented drinks, herbal drinks, such as coca, datura, yucca, and like I said to you, alcohol. Now for hemostasis, they would have used herbal extracts such as andin ratania root and pum chuka shrub, and preparations rich in tannic acid. So again, tannic acid, nut galls, we covered that in the previous page. So it would have been, the plant itself would have been grown in the region. So that would have traveled down, like I said, when Homo sapiens made their way across and down into the Americas, it was around about 13,000 years ago. They would have, again, they would have brought some of those healing remedies and herbs with them, and medicines, etc., etc. So fascinating stuff. So they would have used those herbs to actually treat the open wound. So in other words, when they opened up the head, the brain, to actually to hemostasis, to complete hemostasis, they would have used the plant in those holes to basically speed up recovery and healing and stuff like that. So again, really fascinating stuff. Now here's the best part of it, right? Now during the time of the Civil War, which is again between 1861 and 1865, the American Civil War that was, the mortality rate for injuries during that period of time was basically between 46 and 56%, right? Between 46 and 56%. So basically between 46 and 66%. So when you actually think of those figures in the 1400s, 1400 AD, the Incas survival rate was far greater than that. It was 17 to 25%. So far greater than that. In other words, they had an 85% survival rate, approximate of around about 85% survival rates from head surgeries. So again, when you think of the time and the year, that's really fascinating. Now, it wasn't because the American surgeons had inferior tools or inferior surgical methods. It was because basically hygiene was a key factor in the Civil War to infection and etc. So there was a very, very large percentage of infections from wounds that were suffered during the actual Civil War, and a lot of patients would have died from that. Okay, let's move on. So the last leg of the trip took me to Australia, specifically over to Melbourne and to Sydney. And so I was over on that. I think I'd only touched down. It was a couple of days later. I came back from Nevada. A couple of days later, I was on a plane out to Australia. And so on arriving, I thought I'd hook up with an old pal of mine who lives in Sydney, Alf Davies, and his wife is Aboriginal and his son. And so I spent a day with them. And so basically I'd asked the same questions. What plants would have been used traditionally by the Aboriginal people themselves? So two of the plants that I could dig up was Emu Bush. Okay, Emu Bush. Leaves were used by Northern Territory mobs of Aboriginal mobs to wash sores and cuts. Occasionally it was gargled. In the last decade, the leaves of the plant were found to have the same strength as some established antibiotics. Now, when you think about that, that's absolutely amazing. So the plant itself is super rich in terms of antioxidant values. Sorry, I just had to charge up the computer there for a second. Super rich in antioxidant value. So again, when I was researching it, I could actually validate that, and I could actually find that there was substantial evidence to suggest that it was really high in antibiotic values. So fascinating. The second one, the one down on the bottom. So in other words, you're looking at the picture on the right hand side of the Aboriginal man, and just to the left of that on the bottom, there's a plant there called Plant 10. It's a very distinct look, and when it was crushed, the plant then was used to wrap around the injury. So what they basically did, and actually there's a clip of it on YouTube, where they actually crushed the plant up and then place it directly over an open wound and then put the bandage around the outside of it. And that's how they used to stem blood. So it was used for insect bites and various other and sores, but it was primarily used to stop bleeding. So without further ado, we move on. So if you want to find more information about plants or herbs that are used by, again, Indigenous people or the Aboriginal in Australia themselves, you can actually find a clip. The heading of the clip is called Plants Uses and Medicines Near Warrabinda with Steve Kemp. And it's very good. It's actually very, very good. And these are plants that are around us, are around you when you would walk in the bush, and so easily found. They're super rich in antioxidant, antibiotic values and stuff like that. So just and anti-hemorrhaging qualities in some of the plants, properties in some of the plants. Excuse me. So really fascinating stuff. So if you want to check it out, it's on YouTube. So very interesting. So although the objective when I started was to actually find plants that were used for bleeding or wound care, I could not separate ancient medicine from, in terms of how it was used to treat not only the wound, but it was also used for a spiritual purpose. And so the native people believed in treating the individual by spiritual or religious means, ceremonial and herbal, using herbs for ceremonial and for medicines. They believed in purifying the soul and creating an inner place which could restore balance and harmony. Now, if I was to relate that to today, if you look at most, the best example I can give you is a Cutman by the name of Joe Sosa, a Hall of Famer, okay, from Texas, I believe he was. Well, Joe was one of those, was truly passionate about the Cutman profession. And so what he did was he used to grow his own plants in the back garden, specifically aloe vera, and he would crush it up and he'd use it as a sealant. He would use it in with his grease. So grease, when I say grease, petroleum jelly, could have been buttermilk, whatever it was, but he would have actually used it. It had extremely high antioxidant values again. Some of them had anti-biotic and anti-inflammatory properties within the plants themselves. So he was way ahead of his time, really, really way ahead of his time. If you then look at corner care, the ingredients which promote hemostasis, like good corners actually, you never hear a good corner screaming or shouting. There is always calm in a corner, which again gives a fighter a sense that there's control. They feel secure. Now, good corners, the fighter trusts the coaches, and the whole purpose of that is basically to know that the coaches have their back. So in other words, if the shit hits the fan, the coaches are there to look after them, to make sure that they don't take too much abuse, end off, that they'll step in and stop the fight or whatever. Fighters very early on learn how to control their breathing. That's essential in terms of being able to drop your heart rate, your blood pressure, etc., etc. And then in terms of calm and getting rid of anxiety or unnecessary stress, it's essential as well. Focus on the breath, get that down, relax, and then take your water in. The cut person is a total alien body to a corner. So in MMA, mixed martial arts, and in some organisations where they hire cutmen to work the whole event. So the cutman may be totally alien to the actual people that they're working with. They may know one or two, but basically totally alien to the whole corner. Now, when I work internationally, what I try to do when you're wrapping hands in the back room, again, that role is very specific and different than other cutman roles. In other words, if I worked in boxing, it's a one-on-one job. I'm working with the corner. I may know them, I may not know them, I may have been hired by the corner to work with them. But basically, in MMA specifically, when you're working the dressing room, you're in the back rooms and stuff like that, well then it's an opportunity to connect with the people in the back rooms. So always, you know, there are three key elements I always say when you're walking back rooms: be firm, be fair, be friendly. So connecting with people is essential. And again, if you come across, if your personality is good, basically for them, sitting in the corner gives them again a sense of security. If you're good at what you do, let your walk, as Adam Gigley always say, another UFC Cutman, let your walk be your voice. If your walk is good, well then the corner knows they're in good hands when you go over the tendon injury. And again, walking the circuit internationally, people get to know you, and so when they get to know you, they know you know your worth. And again, let your walk be your voice, not your big mouth. Not pointing at the sky going number one. Officials don't compete. There is no competition. If there is, somebody show me where the starting line is. Nobody told me there was one on competition, that is. And that really irritates me the most, because basically we're there to work with the fighter. We're not more important than the fighter, we're there to work with the fighter. But we're all part of the corner, that balance that we try to give fighters. And remember, the fighter is number one in all of this. So together what we try to do is we try to bring some kind of perspective and meaning to corner care. That's what we try to do together. And just all I'm trying to do today is show you that typically in other countries, they may use, particularly in Africa, when I say to them that a strip of quick aid may cost them $6 to $10, whatever, Africans nearly keel over and hit the floor. So you can understand why they would look for, or they would still use natural medicines or native medicines that tribes would be familiar with, or developing countries. They probably have their own methods of doing it. Now, I suppose the difficult area then is in terms of the equipment list and what you can bring to a boxing ring and Muay Thai or whatever it is and stuff like that. If it's not permitted, then you're going to hit a wall, right? Because you'll get a commissioner pulling you on it. But basically, Africans have that dilemma when they attend international competitions, because they don't have the dollar, they don't have enough dollars in their pocket to pay for expensive hemostats and various other. So who's to say they're wrong? Maybe we need to be a little bit more open-minded when we walk competitions in other countries, and particularly continents which are developing. Maybe we should let people use natural medicines. And again, it just, for me personally speaking, seeing that kind of stuff is just it's fantastic, because I'm a firm believer in using natural products. Not because I'm a vegetarian, vegan, not because I have you know, I'm crazy about I'm just one directional in terms of my own beliefs. It's not that at all. I'm pretty open-minded, but I just, in terms of us using dangerous drugs, it's a no-no. It's against the law. You just can't do it. And for me personally, I've worked hard to get my degree, and the last thing I want to do is to go out there, take a drug like adrenaline 1000 or epinephrine, and use it on a third party where I don't have the license, where I don't have the training and education to do so, where there are consequences, because it's a highly potent drug. It's a stimulant, and so it can cause cardiac arrest, tachycardia, various other, and all the rest of it. So all I'm trying to say to you is, you know, if there are alternatives to use out there, they are natural, why not use them? Now, which brings me to the next part. Quick Aid, my sponsor. Who would I be without them? They've stood with me through thick and thin through the early days, and so I really, really appreciate it. Quick Aid, love you at the bits. Thank you very much. Empire Pro Tape. So again, actually, I'll just flip back. Quick Aid. Quick Aid's an all-natural bandage. Has a proprietary matrix, and so basically it's made from alginate type dressing, so basically a seaweed based dressing, and basically what it does is stops bleeding fast, and particularly within the time frame that we work. So fantastic. Empire Pro Tape. Been working with those guys now for the last year. Innovators of professional bandage, top quality bandage and tape. So fantastic company, good brand to work with. And then lastly, one on my own backyard here in Ireland, First Aid Systems, again have been with me since day one. And for all your Cutman needs and bits and pieces, they've been fantastic and being able to supply them nationally and internationally as well. So, look, without further ado, thanks for spending 29 minutes of your life with me. So, I wish you the best, and again, thanks for tuning in.